right, well, it's good to be in the Lord's house this morning. It's good to see everybody out. If you have your Bible this morning, go to the book of 2 Chronicles, chapter 24. 2 Chronicles, chapter 24. We'll try to move a bit further here as we've been dealing with Joash and some of the things of his life. And if we remember, if you were maybe not here last Sunday or something of that nature, you remember Joash. His grandmother was wicked. We've been calling her Jezebel Jr. That's Jezebel's daughter, and she was out to kill him. But he had an aunt, Jehoshaphat, that decided to take him and hide him in the Lord's house so that he would be protected and then he could grow up. And they took him there as a baby, and then when he's 7 years old, he begins to reign. And we've talked about that a little bit in the last couple of weeks. But I want to point some things out here out of chapter 24 that I believe will be a help to us this morning as the Lord's convicted me and burdened me over the text here, and I'd like to share with you what He's given to me. I'd like to title the message this morning, What Happened to God's House? What happened to God's house? Because that's what we're supposed to deal with here this morning. And we can all agree that God's house is not like it used to be. Is that fair enough? We can all agree that it has fallen way off from how it used to be. I got a preaching buddy that Dr. Phil Stringer, I've talked about him before, and I remember the first time I ever met him. He's up from Chicago way. He's a Yankee, and he's a very intelligent one at that. And I remember me and Brother Doug, he called me and said, I need you to go to the airport with me and pick up Dr. Stringer because I don't know if I'm going to be able to talk to him for an hour and a half. I don't know what we'll talk about. I don't know if we'll have anything in common. And I don't know what made him think that I would have anything to talk to him about either. But regardless, we were coming back, and we were just talking to him about some different things, and he was having a lot to say about how the house of the Lord has changed, and we were asking about mission trips and things of that nature, and he goes to the Philippines at least once a year. And he was telling the story of one of the first times he went to the Philippines. He got up, and he felt like he preached his guts out, did everything he could, and it took him about an hour or so. Yeah, I said an hour or so, and all y'all are checking your watch like, oh, dear God, not this morning. But about an hour or so, and then he sat down, and he said all of those little Filipino people were looking at him like, you know, what just happened? And the preacher pastor there came over to him and said, is that it? And he said, what do you mean is that it? I just preached an hour. Most of the time, they'd have done voted me out if I preached an hour back home. And he said, some of these folks walked here for days. Took them days to get here. Took them hours. Took them days. They've camped out. They've made this trek to get here, and you have preached to them for an hour. They want more. They want you to give them more because they spent so much time to get here to have that. How would you feel if you drove all the way, now let's just use Branson for instance. They have the Sight and Sound Theater up there where they do all of the big plays and shows, and they have David going on right now. If that was the only reason you went to Branson was to watch the David show, and you got there and you bought your ticket and you walked in and they sang one song and said, all right, that'll be it, go on back to the house, every one of us would be fighting mad wanting a refund, wouldn't we? That's how them folks were in the Philippines. They said, we want more. So he got back up there and he preached again. And he preached again. He ended up preaching like 3 or 4 hours. They broke for lunch and came back and he did it again. He said, I almost didn't bring enough sermons to get through the week that I was there. He said, I was running out. I was going to have to study and get something else together. Point simply being this, there was a point in time when the church had a desire and a zeal for the things of God that is getting very lax in today's time. Church is no longer as important to people as it used to be. It's no longer instrumental to their life. Everything used to happen to the church, didn't it? That was back before we even had a community center or whatever them things are called, or city hall where we'd meet up. We had community meetings at the church house. We had birthdays at the church house. We had family reunions at the church house. We had everything at the church house. It was the center of the community. It's God's house, and it ought to be a central part of our lives. But sadly, it's not always that way anymore. But I want to preach this morning on what has happened to God's house here in Joash and his reign. We know that he's been hiding there. We know that he has lived there for 6 years. From the time that he was about 1 year old, when he was taken and put there for safety, he stays there for 6 years. And the Bible tells us in the 7th year, Jehoiada, his uncle, the priest, is going to get him and begin to set him up as the ruler. Y'all remember that from last Sunday or the Sunday before. So he's now 7 years old. Let's start reading in verse number 1. Joash was 7 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 40 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name also was Zibiah of Beersheba. And Joash did that which was right in the sight of the Lord. It'd be great if it ended right there, but it goes on to say, all the days of Jehoiada the priest. Let me give you this first little point here. First thing I saw in the text is that Joash has got a manager to respect. A manager to respect. I tried to alliterate this sermon, so y'all just hang with me, all right? A manager to respect. What are you talking about? I'm talking about this man, Jehoiada. It says that he did that which was right in the eyes of the Lord until what? Until Jehoiada was no longer there. Why? Because Jehoiada was watching him. Jehoiada was keeping him accountable. Jehoiada had raised him and made sure that he grew up in the admiration of the Lord and knew a little something about the house of God, knew a little something about the Lord that he ought to be serving and worshiping, and he made sure that he kept him going straight. I believe he ought to respect him, first of all, because he protected him. Did y'all think about that when we was talking about Jehoiada? If the wicked Jezebel Jr. has taken over the throne, she's now in control of Judah there. She's as wicked as she can be. She's the daughter of Ahab. She likes Baal. She hates God. She is a wicked individual. She's done killed everybody else in her family. Joash goes and he is hid in the house of the Lord. What do you think would have happened to Jehoiada if wicked Jezebel Jr. would have found out that he was hiding Joash in the house of the Lord? What would have happened to him? Gone. Gone. We hid him at potentially the cost of his own life. He went out on a limb to protect Joash, and I believe he ought to be respected for that. He provided for him. He fed him. He gave him water. He gave him shelter. They gave him love. They gave him nurture. But not only that, you'll find that he positioned him as well. You go on and read a little bit longer in verse 3. And Jehoiada took for him 2 wives. What got us into this big old mess way back when? It happened when Joram is married off to Jezebel Jr., Athaliah is her name, if you want to try to remember that, Athaliah. When they're married up, you had the crossing of the lines, those of ruling Judah and ruling Israel there, and they have come together. And now Ahab's influence is now in the house of Judah as well, and this whole thing has gone south. Jehoiada knows what is better for Joash, and he decides to go out and make sure that he has got somebody that will help him along the way and not make things harder. By the way, let me give you a little rabbit trail right quick. I'll try to catch him quick. Who you pick to spend your life with will make or break your life. Fair enough? They will make or break you. They say behind every good man is a better woman. Y'all ever heard that? Are y'all dead this morning? I know it's cold. I didn't know we were froze. When you get up and do some jumping jacks or something, get some blood flowing. Y'all seen those videos? They got some blue-collar workers now, and they make them stretch before the morning work exercise. Y'all ever seen that? You got 50, 60-year-old men wearing their overalls out there with Miley Cyrus in the background, and they're doing yoga stretches. Y'all ever seen them videos? Pretty interesting. We ain't doing that here this morning. Some of y'all getting worried. But y'all are a little more awake now. That's good. That's a good thing. He's positioned him. He has set him up for success. He's got him these wives lined out. He's got the followers. He's got the thrones. He's got all this stuff worked up and ready for him. And now that all this has happened in Joash's life, in verse number 4 is where I'd like to really get started on our message. It came to pass after this. After what? After he has grown up in the house of the Lord. After he has watched the priest pray, and he's watched the sacrifices, and he's heard all that's going on, and he's witnessed the worship. After he has gotten a taste of this, the Bible tells us that Joash was minded to repair the house of the Lord. I was curious about that word, minded. That's an old papaw word right there. He used to always tell me, well, I got a mind to do this or a mind to do that. And it kind of confused me at first, but then you finally just catch on to it. Got a mind to do something. Well, what's that mean? Well, when you look it up and you use your Strong's Concordance, you find there's 2 little definitions of it. And when you tie them together, what that word mind, I have a mind to do this, he was minded to do that, it talks about a heartfelt desire. Something that is deep, something that is poured, something that means the world to you is something that you have a mind to go and do. He didn't just do this because it popped up on this year's to-do list. He didn't just look at it and say, that's an eyesore to the kingdom, let's fix that. He wanted to fix the house of the Lord because it was special to him. He wanted to repair the house of the Lord because it was something that he felt in his heart. He was burdened about fixing that. He didn't want it to be sitting there in this state of ill repair and this state of a mess that it was in. He didn't want people to go by and look at the house of the Lord and say, well, they say they worship the God Jehovah, but their house that they're supposed to worship him in looks like it's falling apart. He didn't want it to be that way. He didn't want people to look at the kingdom and think that's how it was. So he's got a mind here to go and repair the house of the Lord. I was sitting here thinking, why in the world is it so important to him? Why is it so important to him? I believe the house of the Lord was important to him because he had some fond memories there. Anybody else got any fond memories in the house of the Lord? Anybody else got some times they can think back to where it was really good in their life and they had a great time in the house of God? We just had a service a couple weeks ago where people were crying and testifying and praising God for all that he's done. And guess what? I had a good time. That's a fond memory. August 3rd, 2014, when I went down as a lost sinner and I went to the left side of that altar at Hurricane Baptist Church and knew I was going to die and go to hell if the Lord didn't intervene in my life, and I got gloriously saved, that was a fond memory. That's my place. That's my time. That's the dates. I remember some big things that have happened for me in the house of the Lord. March 1st, 2016, once again, the left side of the altar. I guess I'm just left wing on that. Y'all can laugh at that. That's the only thing I'm left wing on. But anyways, on the left side of that altar there, when I knelt down and I surrendered to preach and surrendered my life to the ministry, and the Lord took somebody like me and he's trying to use me, and bless his heart, he's got an uphill battle with me. But he's using us, and I'm so thankful that he's been patient and he's given me a chance. But I've got some fond memories in the house of the Lord. Think about Joash here. You know where he learned to walk? The house of the Lord. I didn't write that down, but that'd preach pretty good right there, wouldn't it? Where'd you learn how to walk through this life? In God's house. In God's house. If you didn't learn how to walk through this life in God's house, then you're probably stumbling pretty good right now. Like sheep having no shepherd. That's what the Bible calls them. He learned to walk in the Lord's house. He learned how to run. He learned how to eat. He learned how to do all of these things. All of these memories that we have of our kids, their first word, and the first time they did this. And Sue was just all fired up the other day. I guess it was last night, because she had Nate and she was holding him and she was kissing him on the cheek, and he turned and he went to kiss her back. Now when he kissed her back, he just like licked all upside the face there. But anyway, she was so excited because he just gave her the first kiss that he ever gave. He tried to kiss me at the house. It had been a week or two back. We were sitting there on the hearth, and I'd been messing with him. And I laid my head down, and when I did, he tried to kiss me on the top of the head, and he instead took his 2 teeth and shoved them in the top of my head. But he wanted to do something. It's fond memories. That same hearth there has claimed a bunch of victims in our family. Trey busted his head on it when it was Mama's house. I fell off of it a bunch of times when it was Mama's house. It's fond memories. I remember things that happened there. Joash is thinking back to all the firsts that he had, all the big things that happened in his life, and it was a place of fond memories for him. God's house holds a lot of fond memories for me. A place of salvation, a place of help. How many times have you gone to the altar and you felt like you had no idea where you were going next in your life? You felt like you couldn't do it by yourself. You felt like you needed some direction, you needed some help, and guess what you found? Some direction and some help in God's house. Fond memories. I believe he wanted to repair the house of the Lord because it was special to him, because he looked back at it and it made him sick that it was in the shape it was, because he remembered how special it was to him. If you look on the house of the Lord and it ain't like it used to be, and they don't love the Lord like they used to, and the Lord's not moving in, and he's not making his presence known, and the preacher's not preaching like he's supposed to, and the songs fall flat, and nobody's excited, and nobody wants to come, and everybody just feels all miserable, you ought to be upset because it's not like it used to be. There's no more fond memories. It ought to make you upset because it's different. Can I get fleshly for just a second? Okay, I'll just ask for permission, forgiveness, not permission. Anybody ever go to the Ole Miss football games back before they took away Colonel Reb and the Dixie flags and all that? Everybody been to them? I'm not a bandwagon fan. I've been an Ole Miss fan 9 months before I was born. They carried me to the games. We had season tickets when Eli was there and everything else. I've been through the highs and the lows. I barely remember it when they would sit there and they would play that song and all them flags would be going. And mine and Trey's favorite memory is when they kicked the field goal and the opposing team kicked their field goal into the stands, what happened to the football? Anybody remember? Y'all ain't real fans, are you? When the opposing team would kick the ball into the stands, it would go into the student section most of the time until the field flipped after halftime. But they would take the ball and they would throw it up and they would get it into the third row up there in the boxes. And then they would throw it off of there and the ball would go all the way around the stadium so the other team couldn't have their football back. It was fun. And then we went there one year and Allstate done messed it all up and they put their field goal nets up behind the field goal with the hands in them. It says, Allstate, you're in good hands. By the way, I've been on the phone with Allstate all week about my truck. They ain't in nobody's good hands. They driving me nuts. But anyways, they messed something up. It's not like it used to be. People go now and look at the stadium and they're like, it's not like it used to be. It's not as fun as it was. And I know that's a terrible example, but I'm hoping it'll make you realize some things. I like church when I go in and I can feel that the Lord is there and He's working on folks. I don't like going to church where I feel like we're at an AA meeting or something like that and everybody just wants to talk about their problems and nothing gets fixed and the Lord's not there. You ever been in them services before? You ever been in there where you think, dear God, I need to go outside and get away from this mess because God ain't nowhere near it? I've been there too. I've preached those places. I had fun the one time I got to go because they ain't never going to have me back. Fond memories. I'm glad when the house of the Lord is exactly that. If I say it's God's house or it's the house of the Lord, who does it belong to? God. Who ought to be living there? If I go to Barry's house, I don't expect to see Brother Dennis. I'm going to see him. We're going to talk about all his problems. I'm just kidding. I thought y'all would laugh at that. Y'all are killing me this morning. Every time I think we're going up, when we get there, it just drops out. But no. When I go to the house of the Lord, I expect to see the Lord. I expect to meet with Him. I expect when I go and I'm having trouble so there be some help there for me. I expect when I'm a lost sinner and I need help and I'm in need of salvation, I expect Him to be there when I call on His name. Right? Is that not how this works out? I expect for Him to be there. But when I go to the house of the Lord and I feel like He's nowhere near it, it makes me upset. Because I hate dead church. Well, you ain't supposed to hate. I hate it. I hate dead church. I cannot stand it. If I just wanted to sit around and waste a Sunday morning or a Sunday night or a Wednesday night, I could do that on my couch and I could watch Joel Osteen and get the same amount out of it. I want to meet with the Lord. And when church is no longer church, and my fond memories of worshiping God and folks getting fired up, getting a case of the can't help it, seeing a little old lady with her white hanky or somebody screaming out to God. Now, I don't want to see none of that Pentecostal stuff where they look like a fish out of water and they're doing all this number here. I don't want to see that. But I like it when the Lord gets a hold to somebody and He gets on top of them and they just can't help it and they get fired up and they forget where they are because they're too busy worshiping God. I like that. I like when the Lord takes over. I've got fond memories of when the Lord takes over. Joash is looking at the Lord's house and he's thinking about some fond memories that he's got. But I believe not only some fond memories, I think he's thinking back to some foundations that were laid as well. Foundation of our faith, salvation. Salvation. I think about all the foundations in my life. I think about all the times that I've gone and the Lord has worked on me and He's fixed me and He's built onto me and He's made me better in the Lord's house. That's where my foundation has been. From Sunday school to VBS to growing up and getting into the older Sunday school classes. And I remember the teachers' names. And I remember Miss Nellie's class because it was one of my favorites because she always had a cupcake or something at the end of class. And I liked my cupcakes after Sunday school class. And then I remember when Daddy taught Sunday school class. And then I remember the men's Sunday school class. And I remember in VBS. And we would go the week before and all the youth of the church would go down there in the fellowship hall. And if it was ocean themed or whatever, we would draw little fish on plates and we'd cut them out. We made the decorations. I remember the foundations of what has made me what I am today. You know what Joash is today? You know what he is here in the text? He's somebody that can do what's right in the eyes of the Lord. Why? Because he grew up in a place that taught him what was right in the eyes of the Lord. He grew up in a place that taught him how to pray and how to worship and taught him who the Lord was. He grew up in a place where he could have some good, solid foundations. What would have happened if he hadn't grown up right there? Huh? If he hadn't grown up in the house of the Lord, who do you think would have raised him? If she'd have let him live, old Jezebel Jr. would have been raising him up. What do you think she was going to teach him? Same thing she taught everybody else. To worship Baal. Participate in adultery and fornication and idol worship and all that other wickedness that was all associated with the worship of Baal. That's what they would have been raised up in. Folks today that aren't raised in the house of God, they have a different idea. I run into so many folks between school and work and everything else. I've seen them from all different walks. Folks that, I will never forget, I was working at Batesville and the guy there, he's one of them dudes that his mouth was filthy. He really was. And he knew that he ought not talk that way because he would always apologize and say, I'm sorry, I'm from New Orleans, and that's just how everybody talks. I don't even realize it's bad. Huh. We don't talk like that around here because we were raised that that's not how you talk. But he was raised that is how you talk. You know what the difference is? Where his foundations were laid. If you were raised in the house of God, you've got some wonderful foundations. You ought to be excited and you ought to be glad that somebody taught you. Somebody got you there. You see, Joash here, he can honestly say, I am what I am because of God's house. Because God's house made him what he was. That's where the foundation of his faith came from. It molded him into who he needed to be. I am who I am today because of God's intervention in God's house and his influence in my life. He's working on us. He's helping us. Galatians 5:22 talks about the fruits of the Spirit. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. Where do you learn all that? Where do you get the foundations of what it is to be a Christian? God's house. In God's house. That's where you talk. That's where the foundations come from. I believe Joash had a mind and had a desire in his heart to fix the house of the Lord because he's thinking back to the foundation of his life and how that it made him who he is, and it's special to him. This place is special to me. Church has been my whole life. All I've known is church. Church, 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 over and over and over again. We went all the time, and a lot of times I didn't want to go at all. I'll be honest with you. There have been plenty of times that I faked asleep or acted like I was too sick to go. I did it more to miss church than I did to miss school. Ain't that great for your pastor to say? But before we get high and mighty, realize you do it too. You do it too. And I'm sure we've all had this same little thought. It's been a long weekend. I got work tomorrow. I think I'm just going to stay at the house and rest today. We've had that thought, right? Yeah. If I wasn't the pastor, I'd probably do that more too. I always thought Brother Doug was messing around when he'd ask Miss Casey, said, do I have to go? And she said, yes, you're the pastor. I understand that. I understand that now. I get tired, I get weary. You get tired, you get weary. But all of a sudden, we need to be thinking back to what the house of the Lord has already done for us. What it's already provided in our life and the foundations and how it has made us who we are. It's special to me. But not only did he want to repair the house because of his fond memories and the foundations that were laid there and how that it made him what he is and how that he was successful in life because of it, but I believe that he wanted to repair the house because of future moments in the house. Y'all want to see somebody else saved? Okay, I was just curious. Y'all got me worried for a second. Y'all want to see the baptistry filled up again and watch me hold somebody under? Oh, yeah. I want to see the pews full. Look around. We got plenty of room to grow. I want to see the Lord do something big in the future. But if we want to do something big in the future, you know what we better do? We better make sure the house is repaired and ready when they show up. What would have happened If somebody is desperate and they're hurting and they need some help and they come to the house of the Lord here in Joash's day, and instead of getting the help they need, they look at it, the roof's falling in, the windows are broke out, nobody's there to help them, they're all alone, and they look around and they're like, I thought this was a place of help. Now I can't get none. Let me tell you a story. I might have told it here before. Brother Joe Arthur tells this story. There was a lady that was a prostitute in the town where he pastored. She got her conviction and she wanted the Lord to save her and to change her life. And she went to go to the church house, and the folks in the community knew who she was and knew how she was. They stopped her at the back door and said, "You can't come in here. We won't let people like you in here." And she said, "Well, do you know somewhere I can go?" I love this. They said, "There's a Baptist church down the road that'll take anybody." Ain't that something? Ain't that something right there? There's a church down the road, a little Baptist church that'll take anybody. You know what she did? She went in the back doors. They loved on her. She got saved by the grace of God. She ended up in the choir singing. She ended up teaching Sunday school. One of the most faithful church members he's ever had. Amen. You know what happened? She needed help. She needed somebody to change her life. And when she came to the house of God, guess what? It was repaired and in working order, so that when she came down there, he was there and he worked. And he fixed her life. Joash here, he's 1 year old. He's 1 year old. His crazy grandmother has done killed everybody else. She's after him too, wants to get rid of him. He ends up in the house of the Lord because he was in a desperate need for somewhere to give him safety and shelter and structure that we talked about last week. Somewhere that would help him, somewhere that would give him a good foundation to grow him up and make him a prosperous king one day. Guess what he found? He found that in the Lord's house. And now when he sits there and he looks at it from across the little way there, when he's sitting on his throne and he walks by and he sees the palace or sees the Lord's house out there, and he looks at it and it's falling apart and it needs repair and it's in disarray. I wonder if he can't help but think back to the day that church house helped him and saved his life and made him what he is, and thinks to himself, there's going to be somebody else that needs it. There's going to be somebody in the future that needs it. I got to fix it. I got to fix it. I've got to repair it. I've got to get it back in working order. I've got to get it back to a place where the Lord is. Because somebody's going to need that same help that I got. And I want to make sure it's there when it's ready. I got 2 kids that need to be saved. So y'all don't realize this, but you got to think about it as a pastor. When y'all voted on me to pastor and I said yes, I would take it, it wasn't just me that was coming. I've got a wife. I've got 2 young ones that I'm going to raise on these pews. I want to raise them in a church that's alive. I want to raise them in a church that loves the Lord. I want to raise them in a church where they can know what church is supposed to be. I don't want to have to live my life telling my kids, well, you don't see it much anymore, but used to, people would get fired up and testify. People used to come to the altar. I mean, preacher wouldn't even been done preaching yet, and folks get under conviction, they'd go fill the altar up. We used to sing that same verse of that song 5, 6 times in a row because folks are just getting help out of it. I don't want to have to sit back and pull the scrapbook out and say, look how it used to be, baby girl. Nate, look how it used to be. You see that man right there? He used to pray heaven down every time he opened his mouth. Todd Grant. That rascal over at Locust Grove. Man, he'd get up there, and he ain't got a dignified bone nowhere in his body. That's just how Brother Todd was. But I'll tell you what he did have. He had a touch of God on him. He'd get up and he'd testify. He'd start praying. I heard him pray one time, and he was praying over the church house, and he prayed down to the nails that put the church together. He said, Lord, I pray that you start the foundation and the wood and the walls and the nails holding it together and the lights in the ceiling. And he prayed for every part of that church house. Son, he prayed. He prayed. People don't do that no more. People don't have that kind of power anymore. Y'all remember the story of Brother Percy Ray? He was out of town. He was supposed to be preaching a revival. He went to the local schoolhouse because they had a basketball game coming up. And he looked at that principal and he said, you need to cancel that ball game. I can't remember what night it was. We'll just say Friday night. You need to cancel that ball game Friday night because We got revival going on, and the whole community needs to be at revival. The principal looked at him like he'd lost his mind because ball is so much more important than church. So much more important, right? Everything else we do is so much more important. No, you need to cancel all that. You need to cancel everything you got going on because you need to make this revival and that time at the church house way up here on your list of priorities. He said, you need to cancel that ball game. The principal looked at him and said, I ain't canceling that ball game. But I got everything lined up. We ain't canceling it. We're not changing it. Brother Percy looked at him and said, you're not having that ball game. They went back to that church. They grabbed a few men from the church. He said, I need y'all to come with me today. They come with him that day. They went out just in the middle of nowhere. He put them up on a hill. He said, I need y'all to stay right here and don't let me out of your sight. I'm going down there to pray. He went down there in that field and he began to pray. And you just got to know Percy Ray. You just got to know some of the stories around that man of God. But he got down there and he prayed. And they said he was walling around on the ground and he was praying. And he was so burdened for what the Lord had on him. And he prayed and prayed and prayed. And all of a sudden he just got up. He said, all right, let's go have church. They went back to the church house. Everything was getting started. And all of a sudden here come that principal in with some cops on his tail. And they walked in and he pointed at Percy and said, that's him. He's the man that did it. Somebody's sitting there like, what in the world is going on? Right next to that gym at that school, there's a cannon factory. And in that same day before that ball game could be played, that cannon factory caught fire, jumped over, caught the gym on fire, put their ball game out so they could have church. The cops came in and pointed at Percy and said, that's him. He's the one that started the fire. It had to be him that did it. And those men that were with him, one of them stood up and said, he's the cause of the fire, but he didn't start it. I watched him all day. He never got out of my sight, but he sat there and he prayed that God would make a way for revival to be more important than what was going on at that schoolhouse. That's talking about praying with faith right there. He had so much faith that the Lord was going to do something that he took some witnesses with him to watch him because he knew what was going to come of it. Anybody got that kind of faith in their prayer anymore? I heard somebody tell me one time that when Percy Ray would pray, that he didn't ask God for anything, he demanded it. And I know that sounds scary. Listen to me, let me explain it. What he did when he prayed, he would say, Lord, you said if I humbled myself, if I did this and I did that, then you would do this. I've done that. Now it's your turn. I'm talking about scaredy. I'd be scared I forgot something. But that's how the man prayed. That's the kind of power and touch of God that he had on him. You want another one? Somebody asked Brother Percy one time about Camp Zion. Said, Brother Percy, what's going to happen to Camp Zion when you're not here anymore? And he looked at him and he said, what did God do with the ark when Noah got off? How about that? How about that? I'm trying to tell you something. There's going to be a time in the future where our families and our descendants need the house of God to be what it's supposed to be. If we don't take care of it, if we don't repair it, it won't be here for them. It will not be here for them. If you mark my words, it will not survive without God's people making sure that it survives. No, Brother Easton, God wouldn't let the church die. I'm not talking about the church as a whole. I'm talking about Beulah Baptist Church. Anybody ever seen the church building for sale? Happens all the time. Why? Well, people quit taking care of the church. They quit repairing it. It wasn't fond memories anymore. They forgot about their foundations. They didn't care anymore. They were insincere about the church house. They didn't want to be involved anymore. They wanted to sit back, cross their arms, wait for somebody else to do it. And they looked up one day, and all the folks that were doing it and keeping the church alive, all the prayer warriors, all the good godly men, all the good godly ladies, all the youth that was fired up serving God, they were all dead and gone or moved to another church where it was still alive. And the church they left shriveled up like a raisin and died. No, brother, it's surely not. You do realize that the October of 2016, right after I surrendered to preach, 7 months later, the church of Pontoc called me, said, why don't you come preach for us? So I went and I preached a few times for them. They wanted me to be their pastor, and I said, no, the Lord's not in it. said, I'm not supposed to pastor. And I said, he ain't told me, he ain't give me peace about pastoring. I said, but I'll fill your pulpit for you while you look for a pastor. I preached there every single Sunday morning for 2 years. For 2 years. And I learned some history about that church when I was there. A bunch of folks was dying off and moving off. There was one deacon, one man of God in that church. And he took his family and he had family devotion in the church on Sunday morning to keep the church doors open. That's all that was left. All that was left. When I got there, and I'm not talking bad about them, I love those people. I love them dearly. They let me cut my teeth in the ministry and make all my dumb young mistakes. Not all of them, but a lot of them. They put up with me and they love me. But you go to that church, and before it was all said and done, we'd get there at 9 o'clock. I would teach Sunday school for about 25, 30 minutes. We didn't have congregationals. There was one guy in the church. He would sing one song, maybe two. They'd turn over to me. I'd preach. We'd go to the house. That was it. Church in downtown Pontotoc. In just a perfect location to thrive. You drive down the road to the church and there'd be 3 or 4 folks sitting out on the front porch. They could see the church house from their church. It was dying. It was shriveling up and leaving. Why? It was all the folks that had fond memories and loved that place, and it was special to them, and they had a mind to keep it going. They were gone. They were in glory. I'm just trying to tell you this morning that we ought to have a mind to keep up with the house of the Lord. And I ain't made it near as far as I wanted to make it this morning. But I'll tell you this. For all the future Easton Smiths that need the house of God, I want to keep this place going. Where would you be without God's house? Where would you be without the Lord's house, where you could go and you could get some help in your time of need? If you're like me, you'd be in a bad place. It's amazing. Amazing how the Lord works. Ladies, y'all come on this morning. I want to share this, and I'm going to be quiet. I got saved when I was 19. I was just starting. I was supposed to be a freshman in college. And I had already made up my mind my senior year of high school. I was lost. I was headed to hell. I'd already made up my mind that I was going to do whatever I wanted to do, and I was going to live it up at college. I was going to go buck wild. I already had my plan. It's amazing when the Lord gets a hold of you and He changes your plan. Me and Sue, we started dating in June 26th of 2014. Of course, we had those conversations that you're supposed to have when you go to start dating somebody. Are you saved? Do you go to church? Yeah, she was saved. I had made a profession when I was 8, and I told her I was saved. We thought everything was good. We started dating. August rolls around, and I'm sitting here right on the very cusp of getting to go out and do whatever I want to do and live however I want to. But she's dragging me to church, and I'm having to go to church, and the Lord gets a hold of me, saves me on a Sunday morning, changes my life. A year and a half later, March 1st, I'm at a revival with Sue. I've been fighting the call to preach. We had an invitation that lasted over an hour, a standing invitation. To all y'all that are tired of standing for 1 or 2 congregationals, you don't know nothing. We stood there for over an hour with me saying no, no, no. Finally, the Lord got a hold of me, and I went down there and I shared my life to the ministry. It wasn't very long after that. It's about a year later, that next September. I was preaching, and Sue had come to hear me preach, and I could tell that something wasn't right. I could tell something was going on. And I asked her, I was walking to the truck in the parking lot, and I said, what's going on? Are you all right? Yeah, I'm good. The next week, there was a tent revival at Herkin. I got to preach in the tent revival, and I made the statement when I was giving the invitation about folks standing up and gripping the pew and having white knuckles. I wasn't talking about her. There was others in the service that I could tell, even from the pulpit, that God was all over them. They were being convicted of their sins. But Sue, I got back to the pew, and she grabbed me and said, I need to be saved. Went down, there wasn't even room at the altar there in that tent. We just grabbed hold of the tent pole in the middle of that tent revival. I got to lead my future wife to the Lord. She got gloriously saved. Now I look back at where my life is now, all because of things that happened at God's house. You can look back over your life and you can think about what this place has done for you. Not just salvation, but when you needed help and you got it. When you needed somebody to just come up to you and say, I love you and I'm praying for you. And you got it. When you just needed somebody to listen and the altar was open and the Lord was there and he had wide open ears ready to listen. The Lord's house is very special to me. It ought to be special to us around here. We ought to have a desire to repair the Lord's house and make sure that it's still here for the next generation to come. Because if we don't get busy and get to it now, it'll die. It'll die. So I'll stand this morning, ladies, as you play.